The county recorder's office smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. I stood at the window waiting for the clerk to find the document I'd requested. My grandmother Ruth's property deed. The one my father said he'd handled after her funeral 3 months ago. The clerk slid a certified copy across the counter. I picked it up with steady hands even though my heart was racing. The deed transferred ownership of Grandma Ruth's house from her estate to Sabrina Cole, my father's girlfriend. But that wasn't what made my vision blur. There were 2 signatures at the bottom. My father's name, Paul Harris, in his familiar scrawl. And right beside it, my signature. Mia Harris. Except I'd never signed anything. Never seen this document before. Never agreed to give away my grandmother's house to a woman I barely knew. "Sir," I said to the clerk, my voice surprisingly calm. "Can you circle where I supposedly signed this?" He looked uncomfortable but complied. I photographed everything with my phone. Asked for the instrument number, the notary ID, and the exact recording time. I turned around and saw my father standing near the door. He was smiling at the other people in the waiting area. Acting casual like this was routine business. Mia agreed to everything, he announced to no one in particular. Like he was explaining to invisible judges. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth would crack. The title of my situation landed in my head like a judge's gavel hitting wood. My name is Mia Harris. I'm 29 years old. I work as a loan officer at a credit union downtown. My grandmother Ruth raised me after my mother left when I was 6. She died 3 months ago from a stroke. I'd been at her bedside holding her hand. At the funeral, I remembered standing by the grave with lilies everywhere. Sabrina had been there too. Her red nails bright against my father's dark sleeve. She'd only been dating him for 8 months. Now apparently she owned my grandmother's house. The house where I'd learned to bake. Where I'd done homework at the kitchen table. Where my whole childhood lived in every room. "I need the notary's journal," I told the clerk. "Today." The memory hit me sharp and clear. At the graveside service, the wind had smelled like rain. I ducked behind the cedar trees to cry privately. To breathe without everyone watching. That's when I'd heard them. Sabrina and my father talking in low voices near the parking area. They hadn't seen me hidden by the trees. "Once it's recorded, we're done," Sabrina had whispered. Her voice carried on the wind. "She won't fight. She's too emotional right now." My father's response made my stomach turn even now remembering it. "Mia never fights. She just accepts things and moves on." They'd been planning this at my grandmother's funeral. While I was grieving. While the dirt was still fresh on her grave. I'd heard them but hadn't understood what they meant. Not until now, standing in this recorder's office holding a forged deed. That day I'd taken a photo of Sabrina's license plate for no clear reason. Just instinct. Just a feeling that something was wrong. Now I understood. My gut had been screaming warnings I'd ignored. Back at my desk at the credit union, I tried to focus on work. Rate sheets and loan applications covered my workspace. But I kept staring at a sticky note I'd written, "Lunch break, recorder's office." My manager Derek stopped by my desk. Asked if I was okay. I looked pale apparently. "Just handling some family paperwork," I said with a smile that felt plastic. He nodded and walked away. I printed out a formal request for the notary's journal. The official log where notaries recorded every document they witnessed. Every signature they verified. Every ID they checked. The notary ID number on the deed was listed clearly. I cross-referenced it with the state's online database. Found the notary's name and business address. A UPS store location 15 miles away. Not anywhere near my father's office or home. Not anywhere I'd ever been. I felt my hands start shaking again. Forced them still. I had a lunch break coming. Time to visit that UPS store and see what their journal said about my signature that I'd never made. The UPS store was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax office. Inside, it smelled like cardboard and ink. A young clerk was helping someone ship a package. I waited until they finished. Then I approached the counter and explained I needed to see the notary journal. Showed my ID. Explained there was a discrepancy with a deed I supposedly signed. The clerk looked nervous but pulled out a thick bound journal. We flipped to the date on the deed. Found the entry. My name was there. Mia Harris. But the signature next to it wasn't mine. The handwriting was completely different. Looping and dramatic where mine was small and precise. And the ID number listed didn't match my driver's license number at all. I photographed the page with the clerk's permission. Then I noticed something else. The notary's commission number. I checked it against the state database on my phone right there. The commission had expired 2 days before the deed was supposedly signed. This wasn't just forgery. It was a notary violation too. The entire deed was fraudulent from top to bottom. I spent 3 hours in the law library that evening. The quiet room with old books and dusty computers. I researched fraud, forgery, property law, notary requirements. Then I drafted an affidavit on the library computer. A sworn statement explaining that I did not sign the deed. That I was at work during the time the notary journal claimed I was in that UPS store. I attached a copy of my time card from the credit union. Proof I'd been in my office 20 miles away. Proof I couldn't have been in 2 places at once. The next morning I filed the affidavit with the county recorder. Then I did something else. Filed a lease pendens. A legal notice that there was a dispute over the property. It would attach to the title. Make it impossible to sell the house until the dispute was resolved. Freeze everything. The recorder stamped my documents and handed me copies. You'll need to serve notice to all interested parties, she explained. I nodded. Already had their addresses ready. Meanwhile, Sabrina posted a contractor access sign on Grandma's porch. Like she already owned it. Like my legal challenge didn't exist. There was a paper tucked under the porch light at Grandma's house. I found it when I stopped by to check on June. Grandma's longtime tenant who rented the basement apartment. The paper was a 30-day notice to vacate. Sabrina's signature at the bottom in that same looping handwriting from the notary journal. She wanted the house cleared. Wanted June gone so she could move in fully. I knocked on the door. June answered with swollen red eyes. She was 72 years old. Had lived in that basement apartment for 15 years. She said you wanted me out, June whispered. Said you and your father agreed I was too much trouble. My throat burned with anger. I'd never said any such thing. Would never evict an elderly woman who'd been my grandmother's friend. She's lying, I said firmly. I'll be back tomorrow with a folder and a promise. You're not going anywhere. June hugged me at the door. I could feel her shaking. Sabrina was terrorizing a senior citizen. Using forged documents to steal property. And my father was helping her do it. I called my father and asked to meet. Insisted on neutral ground. We met at his townhouse kitchen table. He lived there with Sabrina now. She'd moved in 2 months after Grandma died. I placed the certified deed between us on the table. You forged my signature, I said calmly. Just stating facts. My father laughed. Actually laughed like I'd told a joke. Then his voice dropped low and mean. Grow up, Mia. Your grandmother's house was rotting. Sabrina can fix it up. You were never going to do anything with it anyway. Sabrina leaned against the doorframe. Arms crossed. Smirking like this was entertaining. I didn't have my phone recording. Couldn't risk the legal complications. But I recorded everything in my memory. Pressed each word into my brain like evidence. Where's the original document you used? I asked. The one where you got my signature to copy? My father's face changed. Went blank. He hadn't expected me to figure that part out. Hadn't expected me to know about composite signatures and document examination. I stood up. Left them sitting there. The conversation was over. Now it was time for experts. Allison Pike was a document examiner. Calm and surgical in her small office. I'd found her through the State Bar Association's referral list. She took samples of my real signature. Had me sign my name 20 different times in different pens. Then she examined the deed signature under a microscope and special lighting. "This is a composite lift," she said after 30 minutes. Her voice was matter-of-fact. Professional. "Someone extracted your M and H from another document. Copied them digitally. Then merged them with forged connecting letters to create what looks like your full signature." I felt sick. This wasn't just someone practicing my handwriting. This was sophisticated digital forgery. I remembered something. Pulled out a folder from my bag. An old mortgage assistance form I'd signed 2 years ago when helping a friend at work. Standard forms we processed dozens of times. My signature at the bottom. Allison held it next to the deed under her magnifying equipment. "This one," she said quietly. "This is where they got it. Look at the pixel patterns. The size ratios. They scanned this and harvested your signature." She'd write a full report. Expert testimony if needed. But I already knew enough. My father had stolen my signature from my workplace somehow. Probably when visiting me at the credit union. My attorney's name was Keating. He was in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many family fights. I spread everything across his conference table. The forged deed. The notary journal photo. My time card. Allison Pike's preliminary findings. The expired notary commission. Keating reviewed each piece carefully. Made notes on a yellow legal pad. "We file a quiet title action," he said finally. "Asking the court to determine who actually owns the property. We allege forged deed, expired notary commission, false journal entry. All backed by evidence." He started drafting immediately. The courthouse was 3 blocks away. We walked the petition over that afternoon. The hallway smelled like coffee and floor wax. I signed the filing in front of the clerk. My hands had stopped shaking. I felt clear. Focused. This was a war now. But it was a war fought with documents and evidence. Not with emotions and screaming. The process server texted me 2 hours later. Simple message, served. My father and Sabrina now officially knew they were being sued. That I wasn't just accepting their theft quietly. That I was fighting back with everything I had. Lunch rush at the credit union was always chaos. Lines of customers. Phones ringing. Everyone needing help immediately. Derek covered my window so I could take a call from Keating. "Judge granted the temporary restraining order," he said. His voice was pleased. No alteration to the property. No eviction of the tenant. Everything frozen pending the title hearing. I thanked him and hung up. My coworker Jo squeezed my arm. "Go do what you need to do," she whispered. I grabbed my purse and drove to Grandma's house. Sabrina's contractor was there trying to break the lock. A man with tools and a clipboard. I pulled up right as he was drilling. "Stop," I called out. Showed him the court order on my phone. The TRO with the judge's signature. "You touched that lock and you're in contempt of court." The contractor backed away. "Hands up." Said Sabrina had hired him but hadn't mentioned anything about legal issues. He packed up his tools and left. June watched from the basement window. Gave me a thumbs up. One small victory. But it felt enormous. Felt like the first time I'd actually stopped them from taking more. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling and fluorescent lights. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed our TRO request carefully. Sabrina whispered to my father beside her. You said having her name on the deed meant it was fine. You promised this wouldn't be a problem. Her voice carried in the quiet room. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stared at the table. The judge looked up. Does anyone have the will? She asked. The testamentary documents from Ruth Harris? I froze. I hadn't thought about Grandma's will. Hadn't found one in her papers. My father's attorney said there was no will. That the estate was intestate. That's why they'd done the deed directly. But something nagged at me. Grandma was organized. Careful. She wouldn't have died without planning. Your Honor, I said carefully. May I have 2 days to search for estate documents? My grandmother was very thorough. The judge nodded. Granted the TRO and gave me 48 hours. I drove straight to Grandma's house. To the cedar chest in her bedroom that I hadn't fully searched yet. The one with her personal papers and memories. The cedar chest sat at the foot of Grandma's bed. I'd been too grief-stricken to go through it properly after the funeral. Had only glanced at the top layers. Recipe cards. Old photos. A ribbon from something. Now I removed everything carefully. Layer by layer. Under the Bible at the very bottom, I found it. A notarized document dated 6 months before Grandma died. A transfer on death deed addendum. Legal language I barely understood. But one part was crystal clear. It named me as the beneficiary. Mia Harris. The house would transfer directly to me upon Grandma's death. Avoiding probate. Avoiding my father's control. My knees went weak. I sat on the floor holding the paper. This was what she'd wanted. What she'd planned. The notary signature was from someone named Patricia Wells. Church secretary. I checked the commission number. Valid. Current. Active. This document was real and legal. Unlike the forged deed my father had filed. I called Keating immediately. I found something, I said. My voice was shaking. Grandma left the house to me. She planned this 6 months before she died. There's proof. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then Keating laughed. Actually laughed with relief. Bring it to my office now. We just won this case. A title insurance representative called me the next morning. Her voice was professional but concerned. Miss Harris, we insured the deed transfer to Sabrina Cole. Our company provided title insurance for a small line of credit she took against the property. If the deed is forged, we'll be very interested in your lawsuit. I understood immediately. Title insurance companies hated fraud. It cost them money. If Sabrina's deed was fake, they'd paid out insurance on a worthless transaction. They'd want their money back. We're reserving coverage pending the fraud investigation, she continued. And we may intervene in your lawsuit as an interested party. Translation: a big insurance company with expensive lawyers was now on my side. They'd help prove the forgery because it protected their bottom line. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. That afternoon, Sabrina received a letter from the title insurer. Coverage reserved. Potential fraud investigation. Possible rescission of the line of credit. I didn't send it. The insurance company did. But I felt a grim satisfaction knowing she was finally facing real consequences. Financial ones. Legal ones. The kind that couldn't be sweet-talked away. My father showed up at the credit union during the afternoon rush. Walked right up to my window. Smile tight. Tie crooked like he'd dressed in a hurry. This is a family matter, Mia, he said loudly. People in line turned to look. We can handle this privately without courts and lawyers. Derek appeared immediately. Stepped between us. Sir, she's working. If you need to speak with her, you can make an appointment outside of business hours. The lobby had gone quiet. Everyone watching. I kept my voice level and professional. All communication needs to go through my attorney, Mr. Keating. You have his number. My father's face darkened. He muttered something under his breath as he turned to leave. I only caught the last part. You'll regret this. The door chimes rang as he left. Joe touched my shoulder. You okay? I nodded. But my hands were shaking again. He'd tried to intimidate me at work. In front of my coworkers and manager. Tried to make me look unprofessional. Unstable. It hadn't worked. But it showed how desperate he was getting. How much pressure the lawsuit was putting on both of them. The state licensing board hearing was held in a government building downtown. Fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes. The UPS notary had been summoned to appear. To explain why her commission number appeared on a document dated after her commission expired. She didn't show up. Failed to appear or send an attorney. The board suspended her commission immediately pending a full investigation. An investigator asked if I had documentation. I handed over the binder I'd built on my kitchen floor. Organized with tabs. Copies of everything. The forged deed. The notary journal photo. My time card. The timeline. Allison Pike's preliminary report. Everything. The investigator looked impressed. This is very thorough, Ms. Harris. That evening, Sabrina's real estate agent contacted me directly. Her voice was nervous. Uncomfortable. MS. Harris, I represented Ms. Cole on the deed transaction. I didn't know there were any issues with the signatures. If there's fraud involved, I want no part of it. Is there a way we can unwind this quietly? Unwind. Like it was just a simple mistake. Like they hadn't stolen my inheritance and terrorized an elderly tenant. But I heard the fear in her voice. She knew she could lose her license too. Their attorney called Keating with a settlement offer. Dropped the proposal in an email marked confidential. They'd pay me $20,000 if I dropped the lease pendens. Let the deed stand. Walk away quietly. Keating forwarded it to me with a note, your call. I read it 3 times. $20,000 was a lot of money. More than I had in savings. But it wasn't about money. It was about principle. About my grandmother's wishes. About doing what was right. I called Keating back. Here's my counter. Public acknowledgement of the forgery. Deed rescinded completely. They pay all my attorney fees and costs. June stays in the basement apartment until we restore full habitability. And I want an apology. Keating was quiet for a moment. What about your father? You want anything specific regarding him? I thought about family dinners. Birthday cards. The relationship we used to have. I want him to understand what he destroyed. But I can't force that. The settlement talks broke down within an hour. They wouldn't admit fault publicly. Wouldn't rescind the deed. We were going to trial. Fine. I had the evidence. I had the truth. Let a judge decide. A court notice arrived 3 days later. My father had filed to become the sole personal representative of Grandma's estate. The official administrator. Giving him control of all her assets and decisions. But there was a problem with his petition. He hadn't listed me as an heir. Hadn't mentioned I existed. Like I could be erased from the family completely. Keating smiled when he saw it. Not a happy smile. A sad knowing smile. That was reckless, he said. Very reckless. We filed an objection immediately. Attached Grandma's transfer on death addendum. The one naming me as beneficiary. Proving I had a direct interest in the estate. Proving my father had lied to the court about there being no other heirs. The clerk fast-tracked a hearing. Put us on the calendar for the following week. This was moving faster than normal probate cases. The judge wanted answers. Wanted to know why there were conflicting documents. Why an heir was left off paperwork. Why everything about this estate smelled wrong. My father had made too many mistakes. Been too greedy. Too confident. Now it was all unraveling in public court records. The hearing room was full. Other cases on the same calendar. But ours was called first. The judge had read everything in advance. I could tell by the way she looked at my father. Like something distasteful. I testified first. Explained I never signed the deed. That I was at work when it was supposedly notarized. That my time card proved it. Allison Pike testified next. The document examiner. She explained composite signatures. Showed enlarged photos of the pixel patterns. The size ratios that were wrong. The pen lifts that were inconsistent with natural handwriting. The judge's pen stopped moving. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Harris, where is Miss Harris's original consent to transfer the property? My father's attorney started to speak. The judge cut him off. I asked Mr. Harris directly. My father's jaw ticked. Muscle jumping under his skin. I thought she'd be fine with it. The house needed work. Sabrina could afford to renovate. Not an answer to the question. The judge made a note. I'm suspending you as temporary personal representative pending a final ruling on this matter. All estate actions are frozen. My father stood so fast his chair scraped loud against the floor. But he didn't say anything. Just walked out with Sabrina following behind. The consequences cascaded fast after that hearing. The title insurance company served Sabrina with a formal reservation of rights letter. Meaning they wouldn't cover any claims if fraud was proven. The lender who'd given her the line of credit froze the account. Called the note due immediately. Demanded full repayment within 30 days. Sabrina showed up at Grandma's house 3 days later. I wasn't there but June called me immediately. She's on the porch with a suitcase, June whispered. Mascara everywhere. Crying. I drove over. Found Sabrina sitting on the porch steps. She looked up when I arrived. He promised, she whispered. Her voice was broken. Empty. He promised it was all legal. That you'd agreed. That the house was rightfully his to give me. I didn't respond. Just called Keating. Told him Sabrina was attempting to move into the disputed property. He filed an emergency motion within the hour. The judge ordered her to stay away from the premises entirely. No contact with June. No contractor visits. No attempts to access the property. Sabrina's house of cards was collapsing. And she was finally understanding that my father had used her just like he'd tried to use me. I'd almost forgotten about Grandma's safe deposit box at the bank. She'd had one for years. Kept important papers there. I had to get a court order to access it since the estate was in dispute. Finally got permission 3 weeks after the hearing. Went to the bank's safe deposit room with a witness. The security officer and I opened the small metal box together. Inside was mostly what I expected. Birth certificate. Old insurance policies. 2 clipped obituaries from people I didn't know. But folded at the bottom was a letter. Grandma's handwriting on cream stationery. Mia, if anyone tries to move this house without you, go to Pastor Neil at Grace Community Church. He keeps copies of church notarizations. My heart thudded hard. Pastor Neil. I'd met him at the funeral. He'd done Grandma's service. I called the church immediately. He remembered me. Your grandmother was a wise woman, he said. Very thorough about paperwork. Yes, I have copies of several documents she had notarized at the church. Including her transfer on death deed and another note. Would you like to see them? I was at the church in 15 minutes. Pastor Neil handed me certified copies. The transfer on death deed I already had. And another document. A note initialed by my father acknowledging my future ownership for estate peace and family harmony. He'd known. He'd agreed. Then betrayed it all anyway. Keating's eyes flashed when he saw Pastor Neil's documents. This is chain of custody, he said excitedly. Multiple copies in multiple locations. All properly notarized by legitimate officials with current commissions. Your grandmother built a paper trail they couldn't destroy. He started drafting immediately. A motion for summary judgment. Asking the judge to rule without a full trial because the evidence was so clear. No reasonable dispute existed. The forged deed was void. The transfer on death deed was valid. I was the rightful owner. Period. We filed it that afternoon. Served copies on my father's attorney and Sabrina's attorney. Both of them requested a conference call with the judge within 24 hours. They're going to fold, Keating predicted. They know they've lost. Now they're just trying to minimize damage. But I didn't want a quiet settlement anymore. I wanted a ruling. Wanted it in the public record. Wanted anyone who searched the property to see exactly what had happened. That forgery had been attempted and failed. That my grandmother's wishes had been honored. That I'd fought and won. The courtroom was quieter this time. Just the attorneys and parties. No other cases on the calendar. The judge had reviewed everything. All the new evidence. All the documents from Pastor Neil. All the expert reports. She looked tired. Like this case had disappointed her in humanity. I've reviewed the supplemental filings, she began. The evidence is overwhelming. The deed to Sabrina Cole is void ab initio. Which means void from the beginning. A forged deed conveys no title whatsoever. She looked at my father. Mr. Harris, you are permanently removed as personal representative of your mother's estate. You may face criminal charges for forgery and fraud. That's not my jurisdiction, but I'm referring this to the district attorney's office. She turned to me. Ms. Harris, the transfer on death deed is valid and properly executed. I'm granting your motion for summary judgment. Fees and costs to you. Counsel, prepare an order to quiet title in Ms. Mia Harris's name exclusively. June covered her mouth in the gallery. Started crying. I breathed for what felt like the first time in months. Actually breathed deep and full. It was over. The house was mine. Legal and final and recorded in public records. The consequences kept falling on Sabrina and my father for weeks after. The title insurance company sued Sabrina for reimbursement. They'd paid out on a fraudulent transaction. Wanted every penny back. The lender accelerated her debt on the credit line. She couldn't pay. Her condo hit the market within 2 weeks. For sale by owner. Desperate pricing. My father received a demand letter for my attorney fees. Nearly $30,000. Plus the title insurer's subrogation claims. They wanted him to pay back everything they'd lost. He tried calling me once. I let it ring. Didn't answer. Didn't call back. Didn't feel guilty. Some bridges burn completely. Some relationships can't survive betrayal this deep. I signed the final order quieting title. Scheduled a locksmith to change all the locks. Then I did something Grandma would have wanted. Started drafting the Ruth Harris trust documents. A trust to manage the property. Keep it in the family. Protect it from future threats. Make sure June could stay as long as she wanted. Make sure the house served the community like Grandma always intended. It would be her legacy. Not stolen by greed. Protected by truth. Morning sun came through the lace curtains in Grandma's bedroom. The curtains she'd sewn herself 40 years ago. I turned the new deadbolt. Placed a brass key on her old dresser. The house smelled like her still. Lavender and vanilla. Old wood and memories. I decided to turn the living room into a neighborhood reading room 2 nights a week. Free books. Coffee. A quiet place for people to gather. June would stay on as caretaker with reduced rent. She'd maintain the gardens. Welcome the visitors. Keep the house alive. I planted rosemary by the front steps like Grandma used to have. The herb of remembrance. For memory. For honor. For the woman who'd loved me enough to protect my future even after she was gone. I stopped waiting for an apology from my father that would never come. Stopped hoping he'd understand what he'd destroyed. Some people never see their own cruelty. Never admit their mistakes. I documented everything. Held my boundaries firm. Built the life they swore I couldn't have. Quietly. Completely. In my own name. The house was mine. The future was mine. And no one could forge that away.